Hi, welcome to Healthy Pour. I was going to say Tales of the Cocktail presents Healthy Pour. I think that sounds pretty okay. Thank you for coming today. I hope this webinar finds you all in good spirits, or as good as it can be. My name is Laura Green. I am a licensed professional counselor and hospitality professional and spirits educator. We're here today to talk a little bit about a few things to know before we get started. This is not therapy, and this is not a replacement for therapy. This is psychoeducation. And while psychoeducation can be therapeutic, this is not like a therapy session or a group therapy session. You may feel some feelings come up throughout this presentation and this, and that's okay. These feelings might be a little bit maybe fear or anxiety or perhaps a little guilt. And those are natural. Feelings are our friends. I think I've said that every time, but feelings are our friends. They're indicators that we are existing in, a certain way, either a way that's like very good for us or maybe, not as good for us. So I would recommend just acknowledging those feelings and then maybe taking note of them and, doing your best to stay present in the moment. If you do have to leave the webinar, I encourage you to do that. There's no, I won't feel a certain way about it. But if you're feeling feelings that are a little bit overwhelming or unmanageable and you do have to dip out, we totally understand and we encourage you to do what's right for you in this moment. One more thing about this, and I'll get to a little bit of housekeeping. I'm so sorry, I have to take a moment. One of my colleagues just called me and I accidentally answered the call on my computer. And so he was listening to this whole thing and I've been trying to turn it off. And he just sent me a message saying, did I just interrupt you in a session? So I'm sorry if I've been a little distracted. These are the growing edges of doing webinars from home in the time of the plague. So the Tales team just posted some resources that if you need help, a little bit about the functionality of this platform. You have a chat area where you all can chat with each other, leave comments. If you do have specific questions for me or our panelists, there is a questions tab. We will be asking you a few polls throughout, like asking maybe what you do, what your role is typically within the industry, and maybe your feelings about anxiety. You're welcome to take those polls. Those are indicators to let us know how you're doing in this moment. With the questions in the chat though, I want to share that, even though this is generally, you can choose your name and everything, this is anonymous, this is not confidential. So if you are wanting to maybe share something, this probably isn't the space for that. But I do encourage you to reflect after this webinar on your feelings and some of the things that we talk about. Today, we are here to talk about speaking about mental health with your friends. And this is, to me, an incredibly important topic because mental health is social, so our social environment and our relationships absolutely 100% impact our mental health because really everything that we exist within is going to impact our mental health. So having conversations about our mental health, our friends, families is really, really important. And since mental health does carry talking about mental health carries some stigmas and some taboo, it can be a little scary to do. So we are all here today to navigate maybe some of those scaries and, figure out ways to normalize talking about mental health. So I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves because I always think it's weird when you're just sitting there and someone's talking about you, and I think that we can represent ourselves in the best way. So Alex, how about we start with you?
Sure. My name is Alex Jump, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I've been here about a little over 3 years, and I'm the head bartender at Duff & Company in Denver. I am originally from Chattanooga, Tennessee. That's where I was raised. That's where my family still lives. That's where I learned how to bartend. And then as far as like my relation to Healthy Poor and why I'm here today, I along with LP have been working on a project called Focus on Health, where we are aiming to open up the conversation about health and wellness and how we can make better lives for ourselves in the hospitality and food and beverage industry. Personally, I have struggled with anxiety and depression for as long as I can remember, and only about 2-ish years ago started opening up about that on social media and just sharing what I was going through, and even as simple as just saying, today I went to therapy, or today I had a really hard day. And I really saw a lot of things change for me when I started sharing, and also noticed that a lot of people were experiencing that too. And I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't alone. So that's who I am and why I'm here.
Cool. LP? Hey, LP, you're muted.
Oh,
no. Okay, DJ, how about you go?
Yeah, I'll jump in for a second while we're waiting on her to come back. So yeah, my name is DJ Watson. I'm a marriage and family therapist in Chicago, Illinois. So for couples, individuals, adults, everybody. I also have been in the industry. I think I started like in college, like most people, and had continued to work in the service industry for the past almost a decade now. I think it's probably been like 7 or 8 years. So it's been a little while. Kind of done some of everything, bartended and served. And Arkansas, I lived in Arkansas. So, worked down there in the service industry and in the Midwest, very different in the South and the Midwest. But yeah, that's a kind of a little bit about me. And I know Laura from grad school. We went to grad school together, or I guess we did our internship from grad school together for counseling.
Okay, now I'm finally working. But my name is which bartending side. And our distillery, so for that tools that we use every day while dealing with these difficulties, and to ensure that they're living their life to the fullest. That's kind of be on this panel.
And LP, just a heads up, it is kind of hard to hear you. It's like there's a delay, and then it's like really fast, and then there's a delay. So yeah, a few audio issues. So just a heads up that it is a little hard. So yeah, cool. I think we should just go ahead and get into it. I think when people ask me how do we talk about mental health, the reality is that if we normalize talking about mental health, it'll be easier to talk about mental health. Like anything, if you're practiced in doing something, it's going to get easier and easier and easier. So in terms of having difficult conversations about mental health, they are so much less difficult if we've practiced having them. So Alex, maybe you can speak a little bit to Focus on Health and you both touched on it a little bit, but what you're, really aiming to do in terms of like normalizing conversations around health, be it financial health, mental health, or physical health.
Yeah, so our hope is that through just opening up the conversation as like the first stepping stone, that we can help people in our industry realize that it's not unnatural, or, you know, like it's not by no means like a failure to struggle with any kind of mental health issues. Like personally for me, I'm an incredibly anxious person, and I notice very often in my career that that has pretty negative impacts on my overall mental health in relation to my job. So what we realized separately, and then what we've come together to kind of fight against, is that a lot of people in our industry they're in it because they are so passionate about what we're doing. You know, we're incredibly passionate people, and we're also often perfectionists, and we want to, you know, do the best that we can. And what we realized was that so many people in our industry were struggling and suffering in silence because there was nobody talking about what we struggle with behind closed doors. And, you know, and unfortunately, when it comes to your health, if you're not doing anything proactive to take care of yourself, you can't exist. Like you just simply can't survive. And so we hope that through Focus on Health, and while partnering with other people in our industry who, you know, recognize that importance, that just by even just having open, fluid conversations about our struggles, that we can start to normalize those conversations so that there's not shame or any other feelings associated with those struggles, because they are completely normal. And they don't make you any less of a bartender or a bar owner, or you know, a sommelier, or even a server. Like, that doesn't make you any less of a worker for feeling that way. And if you don't take care of those problems, and you suffer, and then, you know, can no longer work in our industry, then, you know, all of that passion is for nothing. So that's kind of our mission and our goal at Focus on Health. And we do hope to not just focus on, you know, mental health, but also your physical health and your fiscal health, and everything combined, because it takes all of those things to really create a healthy life for yourself. It's not, you can't pick and choose.
Sure. And I'm glad that you said that about, you know, like, you know, the financial health and the physical health and stuff too, because a huge source of stress within our industry, especially right now, is around financial stresses. You know, that is a huge financial stress that a lot of people are feeling. And so, you know, I'll go back to saying, when we talk about mental health is everything. Everything that we possibly experience is going to be impacting our mental health, which is so why it's so important also to talk about it. And I think something worth noting about what you've both done with FOH is you've modeled and normalized talking about mental health. Like when we talked this morning, we talked a little bit about, you know, using Facebook and social media as a very regulated way to express yourself, and how at the same time it can be an extraordinary tool to show that, like, today I didn't really have such a good day, you know, and normalizing saying today wasn't a good day, but also normalizing saying today was great. Even in the midst of this, I felt good today. LP, can you speak a little bit more to that? Because you had a lot of great insight on that this morning.
Can you hear? Cool. So we can get into I think that, you know, in the industry, you know, one thing that's really important is that, you know, while we're taking care of other people, we are also putting ourselves first, right? It's a very interesting thing being in an industry where our job is to take care of others, but we so often consider our own health, you know, at the back end. So we're trying to shift that mindset and ensure that, you know, we are providing people with the tools and the platforms to be able to make that transition, that shift, because it is a work in progress, right? Yeah.
And so that's a really great segue for those of you who are maybe struggling to hear. Something that she was talking about was this kind of what we put out selectively on social media, that there's a lot, which is understandable. Like, you really don't want to be totally putting every little detail of your life and every intimate moment of your life on social media. I mean, you do you, whatever. But it becomes hard, especially when you're in a situation where we're all stuck at home right now, that you're not having this contact and your real connection is primarily on social media. So it becomes hard to not compare yourself to other people's experience, but being mindful that all of those experiences are very selectively curated by the individual who's putting that out. Something you touched on, hospitality and service folk, and how, putting other people and the job and things before our needs. Alex, you said something earlier about hospitality and the core of what hospitality is. Can you speak a little bit to that right now?
Yeah. When we talked earlier this morning, we talked about something that's, I think, so important that people don't ever not ever, but people don't recognize very often, which is that our job every day is to take care of other people. And, very rarely do we also relate that means we should also be taking care of ourselves. So, what's the point of providing incredible hospitality and incredible service to people if, you are going to burn out in the industry or worse, in just a matter of years. I think that it can become really easy to feel like, in order to be an incredible hospitalitarian, you have to put yourself last, or even like behind last, whatever is after last. And in the end, you're not going to be able to be a great server or bartender or manager of other people if you can't take care of yourself too. That's kind of one of our founding principles that focus on health, is that hospitality starts with taking care of yourself. You can't, I think, and it's also interesting because people can say that about relationships all the time. It's like, you can't love somebody else until you love yourself. But then for some, our jobs and our work and taking care of other people for our job, that whole idea is completely lost. Like, you can somehow take care of, all of your guests and your coworkers or your employees, and not take care of yourself. And I think it's a tragedy in our industry, because without us, it can't exist. Without the people that work in the industry, it can't exist at all. So why would we not want to put more of an emphasis on talking about our mental health and talking about our problems and talking about issues with addiction and things like that, so that we can all grow and become better together.
Yeah. And I think a really simple way to get started in becoming more comfortable talking about mental health is actually more to talk about help and asking for help and providing help in a way that's not necessarily service oriented, right? So thinking of itty bitty things of what can I ask for help? What can I delegate that's not going to, totally uproot and infringe on my feelings of my, my control over the situation, my autonomy within the situation. So if you think about, if you were working behind the bar, asking someone to cut the lemons for you before you juice them and make it a teamwork situation. Can you help me with this? Can you help me by tying up the garbage can and I'll take it out? Can you help me by cutting the blue tape to put it on the thing and then I'll label it? Just if you could just cut it for me. Asking for those little things then make it easier to ask for help of I'm having a hard time at home. Can you pick up my shift? I'm having a real struggle today, and I just need you to be understanding that I'm going through something today. I need you to, I need help because I am having a hard time managing substances. Can you help me? You know, so if you start small and practice small, it becomes easier. And I think a big barrier to people asking for help in this industry is that we're just not practiced in it. And we try to take it all on, like, on our own, when the reality is that we have this massive community net to support us and people who want us. You have a whole community that are like literally wanting to help every day, but we have a hard time asking for it. And there's a disconnect there. One thing about asking for help, especially when it comes to heavier emotional things, no matter how normalized it becomes, sometimes the person you're asking of for that help might not have the bandwidth. LP, can you speak a little bit to like consent of help and like consenting, you know, asking for consent when you're needing help?
All right, how am I hearing now? Am I okay? Yay! You're taking care of yourself initially in that situation. Help you because this work-life balance in a sense. It's self-care. No, not working.
No, it's
self-care first and foremost. Okay, cool. Self-care first and foremost to ensure that I can help others. So ensuring that I have, you know, boundaries, not being afraid to speak up when I'm not able to help, but possibly, you know, placing myself in a situation or a position where I can, you know, refer them to someone else who may be able to provide them with assistance. The same way we would never, you know, just say no to a guest and not, you know, provide them with an alternative. We want to treat this a very similar way. They're parallel in that regard. So I think it's just important to, if I cannot help you, I can provide you with, you know, this as an outlet or a resource.
Exactly. And I think it's really important when we approach each other for help. I mean, doesn't just apply to industry people, it applies to everybody. And saying like, I'm going through something, do you have the bandwidth to help me right now? And then us taking stock and saying, do I have the bandwidth to appropriately help this person? Because even if we absolutely drain ourselves, if we absolutely drain ourselves in like an attempt to help somebody, we might not actually be helping them and they might feel even more lost. So it's really important to say like, do you have the bandwidth? Are you able to help me right now? And then if you're not able to help, say like, let's figure out how we can get you the help that you need if you're not able to do that. So that's a big one, when asking for help, but also when someone asks you for help. You know, be honest if you're actually able to have that bandwidth to help them, you know. And I know it's hard to say, like, if someone's like, I need help, it's our impulse to be like, yes, absolutely, always. But, you know, like LP said, we can't really help other people and if our cup isn't full, right? So another thing about consent of helping is clearly communicating what you are able to give in that moment. So if it is like a wealth of support that somebody needs, but you only have 5 minutes to talk, like that needs to be communicated, because you don't want someone to like really like open themselves up and like be all vulnerable without, and then just be like, oh, I got a call, gotta go, you know. So being really, really communicative when someone's asking you for help of what you're able to. DJ, I saw you nodding along. Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah. So sorry, my dog just soon as you're like, DJ, you want to talk? But yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the bandwidth and the help. And I'm sure, we'll talk about it a little bit more later about like what that looks like. But also, like you said, right, that I always call it the like oxygen mask test or the airline test, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get on the airplane and they always tell you to put on your mask before you try to help somebody else, right? Is that like all the like wanting to help you and, like Alex was saying earlier, I think, right, like pouring myself out and giving all of this stuff to you can be great. But if I'm not doing the parts to take care of myself, I'm always going to be limited in like my abilities and my skills and just like my reserves and what I can do to help. So, yeah. So, understanding where you're at and where you're coming from and when you need more support, right? And also, like one of those therapist pro tips, right? That help can look a bunch of different ways, right? That, I can help you by saying like, you know what, I can't talk right now. This is really important. I think, who is it? James put in the chat, right? That like just being there to hear people, right? Sometimes, like you said, Lauren, saying like, hey, this is important to you. If you want to talk for these, 10 minutes that I have, let's do it. If not, I can be here later, right? Or I can provide wraparound services or so stuff like, oh my gosh, I'm not really familiar with that. Let me get you the number for, the suicide prevention hotline or the domestic abuse hotline, or, let me find, you resources for people dealing with anxiety or depression, right? Maybe it might not be something, again, where you feel comfortable in, but help is, I think, a bit at the base level, a big part of it from our friends and our colleagues, right? Is just acknowledging that we feel heard and understood, right? That they understand where we're coming from, that they help us normalize and not feel like, we're a bad person or there's, some major deficit or defect that's, infixable with us, right? Sometimes it's just knowing like, I'm not the only one going through this, right? And even if you don't have the ability to help right now or can't fix the problem, that you'll be there to try to help me get through the problem or work my way through it, right? So, so kind of like listening to you guys and nodding my head on agreeing.
And I want to get more into like the dynamics of the conversations around mental health when we talk about like that emotional validation that you brought up. We're definitely going to talk more about that. But I also, before we get into like what that conversation looks like, so we have like essentially 3 ways that these conversations can start. I was going to use my middle finger. You can approach someone asking for help, and you can be the person that someone's asking for help, or you can be the person that reaches out when you're concerned. And I think that this is when it starts to get, I think this is when people start to get nervous about these conversations, because they're like, how do I reach out for help? Like, is this person going to lash out at me? Or when you're seeing mental health issues maybe manifest in, extreme substance use issues, that you're like also angry, like you're concerned about this person, but you're angry at them because maybe they said something mean when they were drunk, or they start getting violent and throwing things, and so that fear for them and concern and anger are all tied up. So then it's hard to confront these conversations and have these conversations without having that anger start to sink in. So it's important when reaching out to somebody that you're place to manage yourself and those elevated feelings that are happening, so that you can be a solid foundational presence in the conversation. Like if you can set the tone where you want the tone to be and you create the energy in the conversation, then it might be a little bit easier to manage when feelings get big in the conversation. DJ, can you speak a little bit more to that?
About like kind of setting the conversation and the comfortability level, it sounds like. So so I think one of the things is I talk to clients a lot about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And being kind of in the place that is not particularly feels like sure footing, right? Or that you know everything, which is okay, right? And I think that happens a lot of times, right? Maybe when we go to help people, especially if it's an issue, like mental health, I always say like, right, mental health, money, and religion, right? Things that we don't talk about in polite company typically, that can feel a little bit, weird to maybe step in and help people on if there's issues going on. But I think it's about being clear about, again, like you said, Laura, like your skill set and your level of comfortability with the conversation of your knowledge area. I think I remind people a lot that when they help, it doesn't mean that you're the fixer, right? That doesn't mean that you fix their problems or solve it to help them out, right? Lots of time when people come to therapy, they don't leave in an hour and I fix their problem with their, wife or their kid, right? It's not that I solve all the problems, right? But it's about, again, making sure, I keep going back, heard and understood, right? And trying to be there for them. But also part of that exchange and part of that growth is saying like, oh man, I have no idea about this, or I don't know, that seems, unsafe. Or are you sure about that? Right. Speaking to your areas of concern or where you don't know something, right? You might not have all the facts. You might not know every bit and piece, right? But, if your friend or family member or coworker says something that's kind of concerning, you can say like, oh, that seems a little concerning. Are you okay? Is that normal for you? Right. Is that how you always function, right? If it's maybe something that's bothering you, or saying like, oh wow, that's kind of outside of where I feel comfortable. Like, wow, I don't even know how to talk to that. You should maybe you should talk to a therapist about that, right? Or do you have other people in your life you can talk to about that, right? So I always, one of those things, kind of ways that I use to ease into conversations or teach people to ease into conversations about that, is maybe asking a question, right? It can be really hard to say to a friend like, no, you need to stop. That is too much. I can't deal with you talking about your mom for the 15th time, right? I'm sick of it. I'm so sick of it, right? But maybe it might feel nice to be like, so what do you do when your mom stresses you off and pisses you off like this, right? Or like, who else do you talk to about your mom, right? Or who else do you go to? So sometimes you can like phrase it in the shape of a question if it feels maybe a little hard to jump into that conversation. But I think,
that's
that
great too. I'm gonna just jump in there too, because I love that because it's actionable too. So like, what do you do when your mom stresses you out? How do you what do you do? Because they're able to still talk about the thing that is stressing them and thing that is prompting them to have this need to talk about it all the time, but in a way that they can start exploring their feelings about it and maybe finding ways to manage it so that it's not just the same cyclical conversation again and again. That's awesome, DJ.
Yes. Thank you. My dog also loves it, as you can probably.
So can you speak a little bit too about when you are in the midst of a conversation about mental health, or an issue that you're encountering on a relationship level or whatever, about the importance of validating emotion and maybe not centering yourself on the issue. Then an example of that is someone's like, I'm having a really hard time because my friend is sick and I'm really concerned about them. And then you come in and you're like, oh yeah, I had a sick friend once. That's not necessarily helpful, but can you speak a little bit to ways to navigate those conversations?
Yeah, for sure. Surprise, surprise. I'm going to be repeating some of the same stuff that I said earlier, which is not super surprising. I always say to my clients, right, we can know it in our heads and feel it differently in our hearts, or the actionable piece, right? The example I always give is, I love my mom. I know I do, but sometimes she's annoying as hell, right? Like, it doesn't mean I don't love her, right? I still know it. But the pieces can be different, right? And so I think, again, kind of going back to my two kind of core rules that I always try to use in just communication at the base level, whether it's conflict, whether it's, emergency, mental health, whatever is going on, right? Heard and understood, right? We're not going to always be able to solve everybody's problems. We're not always going to be, competent in the area, right? Maybe it's just something I don't know about and they want to ask bunch of questions about, right? Or they're struggling to get through that I just have no experience, right? Maybe they have a different lived experience than me, right? But again, right, making sure heard and understood are big keys for me. So with that, right, validating their feelings, being empathetic, right? It's not about if your friend or family member, coworker, whoever is going through a kind of a big issue or emergency, right? It's not about me in that moment, right? But making sure, again, that I heard what you said, that I understood what it meant to you, even if it doesn't mean the same to me. That'll help, them feel not so lonely, right? Not alone or isolated by themselves. You guys, LP and Alex, we talked a lot about like having that support, right? And, being there for people. And I think you started off with like, right, that we have this huge support network that we don't always use, right? So heard and understood. And I think it can feel a little bit weird maybe to ask some of the questions. But again, I think at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you hear and understand them, one, for their mental health and well-being and safety, but also for yours, and to make sure that you are addressing whatever the issue is appropriately for them, right? But also you're fully informed, right? Because nobody, God forbid, nobody would want their, something to happen to a friend or family member who you talk to and they were trying to reach out for help, but you didn't understand it, right? You're like, I see what they were trying to do then, right? Like now I see it, that was a call for help, right? I think we've all are like, these are all right. So making sure that you again, understand, asking questions, giving space for them to have their emotions and feelings, right? Again, I can have them. That doesn't mean they're true. I always say that doesn't mean they're like Bible doctrine, dogma, fact, law, right? That I feel this way, but I still feel that way, right? So making sure that you give space for people to have their feelings, emotions, and try to stay away from problem solving, right? Help them come to a solution collaboratively, maybe, but try to stay away from that and ask, right? Ask what they need. Hey, do you just need somebody to vent to right now? Do you want to try to hash out this problem? Right? So figure out what they need. So that way you can make sure that you can hear, they feel heard, understood, right? And, again, being okay, to say hey, I'm not super confident in this, or I'm not super comfortable in this area. What are other options you can explore besides me, since I might not be able to provide everything that you need.
And that's the asking piece. So if you're the receiver that someone's coming to you, or you've come to somebody saying, I'm concerned about you, and you're, sort of helping navigate this situation, something that I'll say to my friends, because I think DJ can understand this too. As therapists, friends come to us for help, and it's I can't be your therapist. I need some boundaries here. But I'll always ask, do you need to vent? Do you want me to be logical with you? Or do you want me to go get my baseball bat? Not really, but you know what I mean? Do you want me to be angry with you? Or do you just want to emote? Or what do you need right now? Because sometimes people don't want to hear your opinion. They just want a safe space to be mad. And that's or hurt or whatever. And that's really okay too, just having that space. So I'm going to shift a little into talking about when things are maybe really heavy and scary, and maybe there might be risk of self-harm, or you're concerned about substance use. That can be, because substance use can also be a form of self-harm, and kind of what to do when you start to get really nervous. So Alex, you took the QPR training, you said, in February. I'm hoping you can speak a little bit to what that is and your experience with it.
Yeah, so actually another really incredible group of women here in Denver that are working towards really similar goals. They teamed up with a brand and provided QPR training here in Denver. I think it was back in February, and it was a really amazing class. So it is a class to provide you with the tools and maybe a little bit of not comfort, but maybe confidence in talking to your friends or family or loved ones when there is fear of some kind of self-harm. It is by no means a like a teach you 100% of the, ways to 100% like prevent people from doing self-harm, but it provides you with the tools to feel maybe hopefully a little bit confident in talking to people. Laura, will you remind me what the QPR stands for again?
I don't remember, to be honest. Do you remember, DJ? I always call it, it's essentially a suicide assessment.
Yeah, it's like question, persuade, respond, I think.
Well, that's right. It's like the steps that you're supposed to take.
Yeah. And question, persuade, refer. Thank you.
Yeah, question, yes, thank you. Thank you, Erica.
And, speaking from experience, just a few weeks ago, a friend of mine was displaying some like emotions online that made a handful of their friends concerned that they might be thinking about self-harming. I will say that I felt more confident talking to them than I would have without having taken QPR. But by no means are any of these times when something like this happens something that I think anybody ever just like gets used to. So it was still scary and definitely like a trigger for me in the fear and the things that you can't control. But it provides you with yay, a cat.
Hank is back.
It provides you with not just tools for yourself to have these conversations. It also provides you with tools when you can no longer be the only resource, right? Because the last thing is refer. So it provides you with the tools with other professionals who can continue to help. I don't know what else I was gonna.
I think you did a good job. So there are trainings out there. Generally, like as therapists, and DJ, feel free to pop in on this too. As therapists, if we are suspecting an issue that there might be self-harm or like suicidal ideations that are becoming more than ideations, they're becoming like more than just intrusive thoughts. They're starting to turn into actionable thoughts. We will do an assessment that essentially asks, do you have a plan? Do you have means to carry out this plan? And then, something I would say is like, how realistic are we talking right now? And there's a myth about talking about suicide that, or suicidal ideations, that talking about it creates the idea. And that's not true. If anything, it's almost a release of the idea, that someone might be feeling a certain way about it, and vocalizing it out loud and naming it sometimes is a little bit of a release. The next piece of that, when someone is especially struggling and you get a sense from them that it is a very real threat for them, that's when you want to try to convince them to seek help, usually via the emergency room. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of resources out there in terms of places that aren't the emergency room to go. But for right now, at this place in time in 2020, the best bet is going to be the emergency room. If DJ, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, yeah, I think, I agree with what you're saying, right? So there's one of the things I tell my clients all the time in our first session, right? Like you're saying, Laura, that we all have those days where like, F this, it sucks, I'm out. I'm over it, right? That's okay, right? That we have those times, and like you said, that being able to talk about those things is a really important outlet, right? Because you got to assume if somebody's struggling with thinking about hurting themselves or hurting somebody else, it's already going on in their head, right? And so as Newton says, right, objects in motion remain in motion unless acted upon by outside forces, right? Unless we do something different, we're probably going to end up at the same place we're going, right? So being able to talk to your friends or open up, talk about those things is not, a negative, right? It can, again, it's one of those places where it can feel really uncomfortable. And that's what I kind of mean about getting comfortable with being in that uncomfortable space, right? Being more okay with realizing that just because I'm uncomfortable doesn't mean everything's going to fall apart or it's going to all come crashing down. And I'm sure that's what kind of like Alex was also saying about like the QPR training, right? It's like, oh, I feel I don't know everything, but I know more what I know, and I know what I don't know and when I need to get resources, right?
Right.
Yeah. So like you said, having those conversations is really important. Again, giving people space, right? If it is something that I don't feel comfortable with, right? They say like, oh, I, thought about offing myself last week, and maybe I'm not a therapist and I don't know if they're serious or not or how to take that, right? Great time to be like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to say about that. Like, have you talked to somebody? Again, great chance to answer that question. Like, have you thought about that? Like, what are your next steps, right? And I think, if they give you some information like, oh, I'm planning on talking to a therapist in 2 weeks, right? Or they say something like, oh, I'm just going to white knuckle it and just push through and just get over it because I don't care, right? That tells you maybe a lot about where your friend is at, right? And maybe what you need to do or what information you might want to recommend for them. And Laura's correct, right? I always also tell my clients, right? If it's something that you're unsure about or outside of your comfort zone, get some help, right? Even if it's a friend or family member, you can still use those same resources like suicide prevention hotlines, abuse hotlines, all of those things. You can use those as just a friend. They all have resources on what the heck should I say to this person? How should I bring this up? How should we talk about this topic? When should I, call 911? They all have information on that for the friends and family members as well. And usually, and then, the professional will hopefully work with them, like I said, kind of create a safety plan where we plan out like step by step. If you have any feelings, what should go on. But yeah, again, it's never a bad idea to call, emergency hotline or, especially 911 if you're feeling like you're going to hurt yourself or someone else, right? To get some help dealing with the big problem in the moment, right? And then we can worry about the rest of the things later on. But, if you're feeling like you're going to hurt yourself, that's the biggest issue. And as Laura knows, the first thing when people come to therapy is safety, right? You're not going to be able to get anywhere. We're not going to be able to deal with feelings. We're not going to be able to do any of that stuff if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel like you're at a safe place to get into that stuff and talk about it. So anytime that you're not feeling safe, definitely, make sure you're reaching out for some support and resources. And remember, right, there's some levels between I have to deal with this all by myself alone and I have to be in the hospital, right? So reach out and check what support resources there are and what maybe like fits well for you or your friends or family, I think.
And ideally, we want to, this comes back to the very first thing that we talked about in this webinar today, is that we want to intervene before it gets to that point. So normalizing conversations, if you're somebody who has experienced suicidal ideation in the past, or it's something that you're consistently struggling with, it might be a good idea. Oh my God, this cat. It might be a good idea to have conversations with your friends and say, can I come to you if I need this? And if you are the friend on the receiving end of that saying, okay, so if this gets to a point that we need to be actionable and concerned, I'm going to take you to the hospital, or we are going to call 911. And these are the things, being very clear about these are the things that are going to happen. So when it gets to that, if and when, hopefully it doesn't get to that point, it's not as scary or traumatic. It's going to be scary and traumatic no matter what. But, laying a foundation there is really important.
Yeah, and I would add on too, Laura, also to help them build out the resources, right? You're not a therapist probably, right? It's not particularly your comfort zone, maybe. And so also don't put yourself in the position, or if you feel like you're being put in the position where all the pressure's on you, right? That's a great time to reach out for some more resources. If it's like, I can talk to my friend about their, suicidal ideation, but it seems like I'm the only one they talk to, and I'm getting a phone call every night at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I feel like I'm like sleeping or talking to my friend, right? Because I'm worried about their mental health, right? That's also not a fair and balance for you. So one of the things I usually say is, if you're just offhanded, if you're worried or about anybody hurting themselves or anything at all. Sorry, my dog is really excited in there. Usually I say have at least three contacts, right? I usually say 3 contacts, right? Maybe me, I can be one, at least one of the like 24-hour, hotline support lines, so that no matter what time of day or night it is, they can have somebody to talk to. And then maybe one person who's friend, family member, whoever else that they might feel comfortable. So, right, if you're not available to talk at that moment, or you're not, emotionally up to it, maybe you, are going through a rough day and it's not a great time for you, right? That you don't feel like you're letting them down, right? That you don't feel like I have to sacrifice my mental health and well-being because I'm worried my friend or family member might hurt themselves. So, help them build out support networks. Well.
I think that's great. And I will say in a time like this that it gets, and we are running a little long, and I apologize for that. But I also don't want to just cut this conversation off because it's really important, and I don't think that would be a safe thing to do right now. So we're going to keep going just for a little bit longer. I hope you all can hang in there with us. In a time like this where we are all isolated and you have concerns about your friend, it's a tough call because, let's say you have a friend that's not responding and you have reason to be concerned about their well-being. Well-being checks are a little bit complicated within a lot of communities, especially when it involves the police. So in a lot of cities, especially major metropolitan areas, there are specific police forces, people who have been trained in mental health intervention, and those are the people to ask for. If you can go on your own and you think that the risk is worthy to go check on a friend, if they're in a situation where calling the police is unsafe, that might be a time to get some support from other areas as well, maybe a neighbor or someone that lives close by to sort of mitigate that risk, and communicating with your friends that you have reason to be concerned. But don't be afraid to check on your friends. If you start to get really worried, it's better that you check and they're mad at you than if something were to happen to them, and they can be mad at you for the rest of their life, but you want them to have the opportunity to be mad at you for the rest of their life. So, I understand that there is often a reservation as well to take action like that, but first and foremost, it's about safety. DJ, do you want to add anything to that?
No.
Cool.
Nope. I thought about it. I can always talk, but no, you did a great job. Keep everything working.
So we got a question. Is it possible that we can pool our state city resources for outreach via Healthy Poor? So Tristan, you mean in terms of outreach in what sense? Do you want to put it, I don't know if you can put another question. I wonder if I can do on Healthy Poor, do like a suggestion box, or I'm kind of talking out loud right now, but like a suggestion box of like, what are the resources in your individual area? And then I can pull those all into a thing that might be helpful, or whatever resources, as in mobile crisis units. If your city has mobile crisis units, I'm going to put my email in here. Oh my God, why is it moving so slow? I'm covered in cat hair. Okay. So that is my email. If you have any resources in your city that you want to share with me, I'm based out of Chicago and I've got a really solid finger on my pulse of Chicago, but I am trying to get more resources from a national and even international level if people want to reference it, especially since this is the internet. There's a pretty solid reach, and I don't want to limit it just to Chicago since I know people need help everywhere. So if you do have resources from your city that you like, then definitely reach out to me and shoot me a note. That would be very helpful. Thank you for that. Yeah, does anyone else have any questions before or panelists, anything else to add about this? And also, if this was helpful, like shoot in the chat that it was helpful so that we know that you're okay. I know these are big topics and they're kind of scary to talk about, but they're, the whole point of this is to normalize talking about them.
Yeah, I guess my, takeaways, the same stuff that I've said the whole time, right? Heard and understood. Make sure we're working on that, right? To feel any just conversation, interaction. It's always really important because we might not always be able to come to a solution immediately, right? And problem might be bigger than something we can take care of or we can fix. So making sure they feel heard and understood. And remembering that you don't have to do it perfectly, right? That helping doesn't look like being perfect. It just looks like, being open, having a big heart. Obviously make sure you're setting those boundaries to take care of yourself, right? But that you can help and you don't have to do it perfectly every time, that you don't also have to know all the answers, right? That's saying like, oh my gosh, I have no idea about that. Let's, see if we can find some resources together, can be just as helpful as making sure somebody doesn't feel alone and by themselves and like they're the problem as, being able to say like, oh, here you go. This is the solution, quote unquote. So, I just think those two things are for me.
Yeah. And I like that too, because that in terms of every facet of this conversation that we have, that is woven throughout all of it. Like that, those takeaways are a piece of every single one of these things that we've talked about today. Very good. So in the chat, you'll see that the Tails team added that if you need help on Healthy Pour, those are resources that are national and accessible. So if you do want to talk to somebody right now, like I encourage you to like absolutely use them. If you're feeling good, but maybe a little like, take this next half hour, however much time you need to reflect a little bit on, what about this is really making your heart heavy and, making you feel certain things. Feel free to journal about it or don't, whatever you need to do to, feel the things that you need to feel in order to move on with your day. So
yeah, I'll say too, I almost forgot. I'll put this plug in as well. If you feel like and if you happen to be in the Chicago metropolitan area or it's Illinois, right? Message Laura if you are looking or need help, maybe finding a therapist. She can we are working with another nonprofit called Support Staff, and we've collected about maybe like 60 to 70 therapists across Chicago and the state of Illinois who are willing to work with people in the service industry at either pro bono rates or like really low, maybe like $10, $15 a session. So if you need some help finding a therapist or think you might need one in the Illinois and Chicago region, which is where I'm at, reach out through Healthy Pour Support Staff, and there's some fun surveys that Laura can have you do, and we'll get you linked up with some assistance.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of like day to day, definitely follow what it's at FO Health.
FO Health, yeah.
Yeah.
FO Health.
Yeah, really, really great content. Just little tidbits just to think about throughout your day that might be helpful. DJ, are you willing to share your email?
Yeah, actually, you know what I can do? Let's see. How would I do this? Yes, I can put my work email on here if anybody wants to reach out or ask questions about anything like that. So let me get that and put that on here.
Cool. Pulling the puppies back.
Rufus.
I know, right? We've had puppies and kids. Everybody but Alex has not been doing a good job of keeping their animal out of the. Alex is doing.
You're the only one. Well, I want to thank all three of you. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation, and it's something that was really important to me that we did it right, and that felt really good. And it seems from the comments that it was helpful for people. And I just encourage you all who are watching from your homes, just keep having conversations about mental health. If it's good, bad, scary, whatever, just kind of start talking about it and get used to it. And then it makes the conversations easier and easier and easier.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to everybody. And Tony, thanks, buddy. Yeah, and have a wonderful day, whatever that means for you.
Thanks for having
Thanks
us.
so much.
Thank you.